Hello, guys, and today in Moscow the traffic was paralyzed literally during all the day. Because the real Putin, not one of many of his doubles, but the real one, decided to travel to a nearby region. So his security blocked all the highways and kept them closed during all the day. Thus, hundreds of thousands of Russians were stuck and kept cursing that dictator. You may say this is nothing new. Putin is a classical bully and all bullies are cowards, plus all presidents are protected. But I've learned about this news from the Russian Telegram channels and I was so pleased to read the comments below them when they all agreed that Putin's security, his bunkers, his guards, everything is super exaggerated and that it gets worse and worse with each week. They enumerated the reasons why he is so afraid to live this life. And no, not the Ukrainian drones were the main reason, or Budan, or I don't know, but the level of disappointment inside Russia, the fact that people now wish him bad. Millions who supported the idea of the special military operation are now very disappointed with its results. They observe the collapse of the Russian economy, they fear the general conscription, they experience explosions, air raid alerts on the Russian territory, something that seemed totally unbelievable, and Putin promised to protect them from any kind of problem. You know, this is a classical Russian agreement between the Tsar, the dictator, and the apolitical population that they give away their rights and freedoms to him, but he guarantees them some kind of stability and security, and he failed with that. So let's discuss what these high levels of fear and panic in the Kremlin mean for the future of Putin and this war. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see Putin in The Hague, subscribe and share these videos to spread the truth. So today, a lot of Russian Telegram channels, social media platforms were sharing a map that reflected the size of Moscow that was literally paralyzed because of Putin's car. And they did not block just one road or two roads, but they literally closed all the city for a very long period of time, and that is not normal. I know I often live in Kyiv in the center of our capital. I have seen Zelensky traveling Kyiv. He is also in great danger. I actually believe in way stronger danger than Putin in Moscow, and he never does that. But what I loved are the comments below these photos and videos with people expressing their total dissatisfaction. And no, not just because they had to wait for hours, not because Moscow is now a war zone, and it's not just Putin who blocks, any kind of movement on the roads. It's also the Ukrainian drones that now control skies above Moscow and skies above the European part of the Russian Federation, but that's a separate topic. But the fact that Vladimir Putin now irritates his own population that just before the failed blitzkrieg considered him the greatest leader of the Russian civilization. They often name their country a civilization, another problem with this myth that they keep developing. But anyway, it often happens like that with authoritarian leaders that at the beginning of their career, they embody everything that the nation expects from its leader. And when they fail, and it's not Putin, not alone, he is not alone in this war. And please never say it's Putin's war, because here in Ukraine, we have hundreds, thousands of Russian soldiers. Thousands of Russians target missiles on Ukraine, construct drones to destroy Ukrainian homes. So it is the war of millions of Russians, but the failure might be the one of Putin. And this month, he collected a lot of problems and reasons for which Russians are angry at him. Beginning, first of all, with this duration of what was supposed to be a blitzkrieg. 4 years longer than the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War for the Soviet Army. And they wildly discuss this topic in Russia. It is even prohibited for the Russian media to compare these wars. Second, this is the state of the Russian economy. Perhaps I should put it on the first place because Russians are in panic. Prices are rising, taxes are rising, the value of ruble is falling, and now banks and even ATMs prevent the apolitical Russian population from withdrawing their own money. And I'm sure they are not that stupid and they understand it's a very, very, very dangerous signal. Putin is also losing on the geopolitical arena. He lost his body in Venezuela. He did not manage to protect his friends in Iran. He lost Syria, and many, many other examples that are discussed online in Russia. Prominent military vloggers, political experts now openly talk about that. They were waiting for Putin's reaction when some of his tankers were seized, and the process beautifully continues. But he simply disappeared. And that is a classical approach of a coward, which he is. As any bully, Putin is always afraid when he encounters real strength. And for, I think, the first 2 weeks or even more, he literally disappeared from the Russian media. That television, as I've already mentioned to you, broadcast canned videos, some of which were like 8 years older, and Putin's face changed drastically, way more fillers since then. And now, when he appeared, they decided to close all the Moscow for him to travel. So we're not talking about half an hour during which, like 100 cars travel in a specific direction. No, it was just a very brief visit of Putin to a nearby region, and all the capital was paralyzed. I'm sure this only adds to that dissatisfaction, especially taking into account that Moscow is now one of those cities that suffers most because Putin and millions who supported him brought war to that capital. We control the skies above Moscow. Domodedovo, Sheremetyevo, Vnukovo perhaps spend more time closed than opened. We cancel thousands of their flights. But this perhaps saves thousands of Russian lives because, the state of the Russian aviation is extremely, extremely miserable and dangerous for the lives of the passengers. Yesterday, I've recorded a video about that, and today I've learned that in some regions of the Russian Federation, they started flying people in cargo planes, and we're not talking about some crew delivering something. No, we're talking about ordinary civilian passengers. So, by paralyzing traffic in the Moscow skies and in other big cities of the Russian Federation, we may actually save lives of some Russians who were risky enough to travel. But this fear of Putin will only keep growing, same as the number of problems caused by his economic mismanagement, by his military mismanagement, and the strength and resilience of the Ukrainian people and your support. So, this may be the time when some oligarchs or some of his enemies or friends who are actually enemies will consider changing him. This is not the real victory. The real victory is to defeat and demilitarize Russia, but I'm sure these signals of his very chaotic, very unpredictable behavior, the fact that he was hiding for weeks during most challenging times for the modern Russian Federation, and that now he literally closes all the capital to travel a couple of kilometers, only demonstrates that, he is afraid and he knows why he is so afraid of his own people. I think that is perhaps the worst thing that any leader can encounter in his or her life. And I would be interested to know, how do you think? What is Putin's biggest fear? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to join me tomorrow 9 p.m. Kyiv for our live conversation. Also follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Discord. The links in the description of this video, same as the link to our merch shop. And thank you so much for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channels, but most importantly, thank you for standing with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!